Moving to Willowbrook Estates seemed like the perfect decision. The neighborhood boasted pristine lawns, matching mailboxes, and a beautiful community pool that sparkled like a jewel in the center of our subdivision. What I didn't anticipate was Karen Pemberton, our HOA president, who treated the Homeowners Association like her personal kingdom and the rest of us like her unwilling subjects. Karen was the kind of person who measured grass height with an actual ruler and sent violation notices for trash cans left out 30 minutes past the designated pickup time. She had perfectly styled blonde hair that never moved, even in strong wind, and a clipboard that seemed permanently attached to her manicured hand. Her voice carried across the neighborhood like a foghorn, usually delivering some new edict or complaint about property compliance. If you're enjoying this tale of suburban warfare, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Karen Eat World for more stories of entitled behavior getting its comeuppance. Trust me, this one gets wild. The trouble started on a sweltering Tuesday in July. My twins, Emma and Jake, had been looking forward to their pool day all week. They'd finished their summer reading early, completed their chores without complaint, and even helped our elderly neighbor Mr. Peterson with his groceries. As we approached the community pool, beach towels and sunscreen in hand, we were greeted by an official-looking sign posted on the gate. Pool closed for emergency maintenance. Authorized personnel only. By order of Willowbrook Estates HOA Karen Pemberton, President. The sign looked professional enough, complete with the HOA logo and everything. But something felt off. The pool water looked crystal clear, the equipment hummed normally, and there were no maintenance trucks or workers anywhere in sight. My kids' disappointed faces as we trudged back home sparked the first flames of suspicion in my mind. That evening, while grilling dinner on my back patio, I heard the unmistakable sounds of a pool party. Laughter, splashing, and music drifted over from the direction of the community pool. Curious, I climbed onto my deck chair and peered over the privacy fence that bordered the pool area. What I saw made my blood boil. Karen Pemberton was hosting what appeared to be an elaborate birthday party for her precious daughter Brittany. The supposedly closed pool was filled with about 20 teenagers, complete with a DJ setup, catered food, and enough decorations to supply a small wedding. The emergency maintenance sign had been moved to lean against the pool house, and Karen stood poolside in a designer sundress, playing hostess like she owned the place. The next morning, I approached Karen diplomatically. I found her power walking around the neighborhood, clipboard in hand, probably looking for violations to cite. Karen, I said politely, I noticed there was quite a celebration at the pool last night. I was wondering when the maintenance would be completed so the other residents could enjoy the facilities again. Karen stopped mid-stride and fixed me with a look that could freeze lava. The pool is closed indefinitely for safety reasons. As HOA president, I have the authority to make executive decisions for the welfare of our community. Perhaps you should focus on your own property instead of nosing around community affairs. She gestured toward my front yard with her pen. Speaking of which, your hedge appears to be 3 inches higher than the regulation height. You'll be receiving a violation notice. My hedge was perfectly trimmed, and we both knew it. This was Karen's way of establishing dominance and shutting down any further questions about the pool situation. But I'd dealt with bullies before, and Karen had just made a critical error. She declared war on someone with both the resources and the patience to fight back strategically. Over the next few days, I did some quiet investigation. A conversation with Tom, our neighborhood's part-time maintenance coordinator, confirmed my suspicions. No emergency maintenance scheduled, he told me, scratching his head. Pool's in perfect condition. Karen just told me to stay away from the area until further notice. I also discovered that Karen had been hosting these exclusive pool parties regularly, using fake closure signs to reserve the facility for her personal use. She'd invite her book club, her daughter's friends, and her tennis partners, essentially treating the community pool as her private backyard oasis while the rest of us sweltered in the summer heat. The situation escalated when I attempted to address the issue through proper channels. I submitted a formal complaint to the HOA board, requesting transparency about the pool closure and a timeline for reopening. Karen's response arrived 2 days later, a masterpiece of bureaucratic deflection and veiled threats. Dear resident, it began. Your recent inquiry regarding pool operations has been noted. Please be advised that questioning the decisions of elected HOA officials constitutes a violation of our community harmony guidelines. Additionally, your property has been flagged for multiple infractions including hedge height violations, mailbox positioning discrepancies, and unauthorized decorative elements in your front yard landscaping. The unauthorized decorative elements were 3 small solar lights along my walkway that had been there for 2 years without complaint. Karen was systematically fabricating violations to silence my objections to her pool monopoly. The message was clear: challenge her authority, and she'd make my life miserable with petty citations and harassment. But Karen had seriously underestimated her opponent. While she saw a regular suburban homeowner, what she was actually dealing with was someone with a very particular set of skills and connections developed over 20 years in commercial real estate law. I'd helped developers navigate complex zoning issues, assisted municipalities with property acquisitions, and maintained relationships with everyone from city planners to construction contractors. More importantly, I had something Karen desperately wanted but didn't know I possessed: significant liquid assets from a recent business sale that had left me semi-retired and looking for interesting projects to occupy my time. Karen's pool games were about to become very expensive for her. My first step was research. I spent several days at the county courthouse, reviewing property records, zoning laws, and the original development agreements for Willowbrook Estates. What I discovered was fascinating. The community pool, while maintained by the HOA, was actually built on a separate parcel of land that had been deeded to the homeowners association by the original developer. More interesting was a small strip of land, barely 15 feet wide, that ran along the eastern border of the pool property. This strip had been retained by the developer and never sold. According to public records, it had eventually been acquired by the county for unpaid taxes and was now available for purchase by private buyers. This narrow strip of land was crucial because it contained the only vehicle access point to the pool area. The maintenance gate, the emergency access, and the route used by all service vehicles had to cross this 15-foot corridor. Without access to this strip, the pool became effectively landlocked, accessible only by foot through residents' backyards. I contacted my attorney, Sarah Chen, a brilliant property lawyer who specialized in exactly these kinds of complex real estate situations. This is interesting, she said, studying the survey maps I'd brought her. If you acquired this strip, you'd have significant control over access to the pool facility. There are easement laws to consider, but given that this was never formally established as a permanent access route, you'd have considerable leverage. The wheels were now in motion. While Karen continued her pool parties and harassment campaign against me, I was quietly working through the bureaucratic process of purchasing the land strip from the county. It took 6 weeks of paperwork, inspections, and legal reviews, but the transaction was surprisingly straightforward. For the modest sum of $12,000, I became the owner of the most strategically valuable 15 feet of land in Willowbrook Estates. During this time, Karen's behavior became increasingly outrageous. She'd expanded her pool parties to include her sister's family from out of town, her neighbor's graduation celebration, and even a small wedding reception for someone I'd never seen before in the neighborhood. The pool was essentially operating as Karen's private event venue, complete with catering trucks and party supply deliveries, while the rest of us were banned from the facility we all paid to maintain through our HOA fees. She also ramped up her harassment campaign against me personally. I received violation notices for having my garage door open during daylight hours, for parking my car 6 inches beyond the exact center of my driveway, and for allowing my newspaper to remain on the front step past 8 a.m. Each citation came with threats of fines and legal action if not immediately corrected. The final straw came on a Saturday afternoon when I caught Karen instructing her teenage daughter and friends to throw pool toys and trash into my backyard while they partied. When I politely asked them to stop, Karen emerged from the pool house like an avenging angel. "How dare you harass children at a private event," she shrieked, her voice carrying across half the neighborhood. "This is exactly the kind of antisocial behavior that makes you unsuitable for this community. I'm calling the police to report your aggressive conduct toward minors." She actually did call 911, forcing me to explain to two bewildered police officers that I'd simply asked teenagers to stop throwing trash in my yard. The officers quickly determined that no crime had been committed, but the humiliation of having squad cars in my driveway while Karen smirked from her poolside throne was the final insult I was willing to tolerate. The next Monday morning, I implemented my plan. The first step was installing a gate across my newly acquired land strip, complete with heavy-duty locks and a professional sign reading "Private property, no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted." The gate was positioned to block vehicle access to the pool area while still allowing foot traffic along the sidewalk. I also contracted with a fencing company to install a decorative but substantial barrier along the entire length of my property strip, creating a clear physical boundary between my land and the pool facility. The fence was beautiful, professionally installed, and completely legal according to all local zoning ordinances. Karen's first reaction was predictable outrage. She stormed over to my house that afternoon, her face red with fury and her clipboard clutched like a weapon. "You cannot block access to community property," she screamed from my front porch. "This is illegal and I'm calling the city immediately." "Actually, Karen," I replied calmly, "you're welcome to call anyone you'd like. This is my private property, legally purchased and properly developed according to all applicable codes. I'm not blocking access to anything. People can still walk to the pool through the residential areas." What Karen didn't yet understand was that while foot access remained available, vehicular access was now completely under my control. No maintenance trucks, no catering vehicles, no delivery services, and no emergency vehicles could reach the pool facility without crossing my property. And I had no intention of granting permission for such access to support Karen's private events. The impact became apparent within days. Karen had scheduled another elaborate pool party for her book club, complete with catered lunch and floral arrangements. But when the catering truck arrived and couldn't access the pool area, the carefully planned event devolved into chaos. The caterers had to hand-carry dozens of food containers and decorative items through residential yards, trampling flower beds and creating a spectacle that had the entire neighborhood watching from their windows. Karen was forced to pay additional fees for the extra labor and property damage, but she still didn't grasp the full scope of her situation. She continued scheduling events, apparently believing she could browbeat me into reopening access through sheer persistence and escalating threats. Her next strategy was to weaponize the HOA board against me. She called an emergency meeting and attempted to pass a resolution demanding that I restore access to the pool area. However, she'd made a crucial oversight in her years of autocratic rule. She'd alienated most of the other board members with her controlling behavior and arbitrary decisions. When the vote came, the board sided with me by a margin of 4-1, with Karen casting the only dissenting vote. Board member Mike Rodriguez actually thanked me publicly for taking action to address the unauthorized private use of community facilities. It turned out that other residents had been complaining about Karen's pool monopoly for months, but had been too intimidated to speak up directly. Karen's response to this defeat was to double down on her harassment campaign. She began conducting daily inspections of my property, looking for any possible violation she could cite. She measured my grass height, photographed my mailbox from multiple angles, and even brought a level to check if my driveway was perfectly straight. But her most vindictive action was scheduling a massive pool party for the upcoming Labor Day weekend, inviting what appeared to be half the town to celebrate at her facility. She sent invitations to her extended family, her church group, her tennis club, and even posted invitations on social media, essentially throwing a public party at a private community pool. This was Karen's declaration of total war, her attempt to demonstrate that she could do whatever she wanted regardless of my property ownership or the board's opposition. She was about to learn that some wars shouldn't be started, especially against opponents with deeper resources and longer patience. My response was swift and devastating. I contacted the city's code enforcement division and reported that large public events were being held at a residential community pool without proper permits, adequate parking, or appropriate facilities for the number of attendees. I also reached out to the fire marshal's office regarding potential safety violations related to overcrowding and blocked emergency access. But the truly brilliant stroke was my call to the health department. I explained that a residential pool facility was being used for commercial catering events without proper food service licenses, adequate restroom facilities for large groups, or compliance with public health regulations governing food preparation and service areas. The resulting inspection blitz was spectacular. Code enforcement arrived first, followed by fire safety inspectors, then health department officials. Karen's Labor Day extravaganza was shut down before the first guest arrived, with the pool facility condemned for multiple safety violations and unauthorized commercial use. The inspectors issued citations for operating an unlicensed event venue, violating fire safety codes, exceeding capacity limits, and conducting food service without proper permits. The fines totaled nearly $15,000, all levied against the HOA due to Karen's actions as president. But I wasn't finished. Karen had spent months weaponizing bureaucracy against me and other residents. It was time for her to experience the full power of her own tactics, amplified and professionally executed. I hired a private investigation firm to document every instance of Karen's unauthorized pool closures and private events over the past year. Using security camera footage from cooperative neighbors, social media posts, and witness statements, they compiled a comprehensive report detailing her systematic abuse of her HOA position for personal benefit. This report, along with evidence of her harassment campaigns and fraudulent violation citations, was submitted to the State Attorney General's office as a formal complaint alleging HOA fraud and abuse of fiduciary duty. I also sent copies to the county prosecutor's office and the Better Business Bureau. The legal pressure was mounting, but Karen still seemed to believe she could outlast the storm through sheer stubbornness. She continued trying to schedule pool events, apparently convinced that the citations and investigations were temporary obstacles that would eventually disappear. Her final miscalculation was attempting to use her remaining HOA authority to force me to sell my land strip back to the association. She scheduled another emergency board meeting and proposed using HOA funds to purchase my property through eminent domain proceedings. This was exactly the opening I'd been waiting for. During the board meeting, held in the community clubhouse with about 30 residents in attendance, Karen stood before a PowerPoint presentation outlining her plan to reclaim community access routes through legal acquisition. The HOA has the authority and responsibility to maintain access to community facilities, she declared, clicking through slides showing survey maps and legal precedents. We cannot allow one resident to hold our entire community hostage over a personal dispute. When she finished her presentation and called for questions, I stood up in the back of the room. Karen, before the board votes on this proposal, I think everyone should understand the full financial implications of your suggestion. I walked to the front of the room and connected my laptop to the projector. My presentation was much more comprehensive than Karen's. The first slide showed a detailed breakdown of the legal costs, fines, and penalties that Karen's actions had already cost the HOA. The total was approaching $30,000. The second slide displayed a timeline of Karen's unauthorized pool closures, complete with dates, durations, and the private events she'd hosted during each closure. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, with photographs and social media posts showing her parties in progress while residents were banned from the facility. The third slide was the masterpiece, a legal opinion from my attorney explaining that Karen's systematic abuse of her HOA position constituted breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, and potentially criminal misappropriation of community resources. The opinion noted that individual board members could be held personally liable for damages if they continued to support her actions. Furthermore, I continued, any attempt by this HOA to acquire my property through eminent domain would require demonstrating legitimate public necessity. Given that Karen has used her control over pool access exclusively for personal benefit rather than community welfare, such a legal action would be both frivolous and expensive. The room was silent except for the software of the projector. Karen's face had gone completely white as she stared at the evidence of her own misconduct displayed for the entire community to see. But I had saved the best for last. The final slide revealed my ultimate move, the card I'd been holding in reserve throughout this entire conflict. I've also taken the liberty of researching alternative solutions to our community's pool access situation. Rather than engaging in costly legal battles, I'm prepared to offer the HOA a permanent easement across my property for emergency and maintenance access. The easement would cost the association exactly $1, with only one simple condition. Karen leaned forward, probably expecting some reasonable compromise that would allow her to save face while restoring the status quo. The condition is that Karen Pemberton immediately resign from all HOA positions and be permanently barred from seeking any leadership role in this community. Additionally, she must personally reimburse the HOA for all fines, legal costs, and damages resulting from her abuse of office. The room erupted in murmurs and whispered conversations. Karen stood frozen at the front of the room, finally understanding that I'd maneuvered her into an impossible position. She could fight the offer and face mounting legal bills, criminal investigations, and potential personal liability, or she could accept defeat and lose everything she'd been fighting to protect. But the true genius of my strategy wasn't just the financial pressure or legal exposure. It was using Karen's own behavior and motivations against her. She'd spent years wielding petty authority over her neighbors, using rules and regulations as weapons to control and intimidate others. Now she was facing the same bureaucratic machinery she'd weaponized, only operated by someone with the resources and expertise to use it at maximum efficiency. The board vote was unanimous, 5-0 in favor of accepting my easement offer, with Karen abstaining due to obvious conflict of interest. Within minutes, Karen found herself stripped of all authority and facing personal financial ruin, all because she couldn't resist turning a community pool into her private playground. As the meeting broke up and residents filed out, many stopped to thank me for finally addressing Karen's years of abuse. Karen remained standing at the front of the room, staring at the projection screen where my evidence of her misconduct was still displayed. The look on her face was a mixture of shock, rage, and dawning comprehension. She'd spent months believing she was engaged in a simple battle of wills with a troublesome resident. Only now did she realize she'd been systematically outmaneuvered by someone who'd turned her own tactics into the instruments of her destruction. Karen's mouth opened and closed silently as she processed the full scope of what had just happened. Her private pool parties had cost her everything: her position, her reputation, her financial security, and her standing in the community she'd tried so hard to control. "Before you go," Karen said, "and if you enjoyed watching this epic takedown unfold, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to Karen Eat World for more stories of entitled behavior meeting its match. Trust me, we've got plenty more tales of karmic justice coming your way."